Hello and welcome to The Digital Shift, powered by Foxit. So this is the show where technology leaders explore how innovation, AI, and smarter workflows are reshaping the way that we work. I'm your host, Charles. Let's going to dive right in. My guest today, Judson, has partnered with companies across diverse industries to optimize their digital strategies, streamline operations, and leverage automation for growth. As a former management consultant, Judson has a proven track record of delivering impactful solutions that enhance efficiency and drive revenue. In addition to his consulting expertise, Judson is the author of two influential books, The AI Myth Reimagined, Everything in Business is Changing, and Catch the Vibe, How to Build Apps That Matter. These works provide practical insights into AI's role in business and coding, making complex concepts accessible to a wide audience. Today, Judson is actively consulting with businesses to strategically implement AI, empowering them to harness technology for competitive advantage. Simultaneously, he leads a coaching program and cohort focused on vibe coding, guiding participants to master the art of developing apps that people want, use, and love, blending technical skill with the user-centric design. Judson, thanks so much for joining me today.
You bet.
So today we're going to be taking a look at top-down or bottom-up, how real AI automation starts and sticks. And this is one that I'm particularly excited about because it gets to take a look at AI implementation from two different angles, from that of a CIO looking down and from that of a knowledge worker looking up. So let's go ahead and start with the top-down approach.
Sure. I like how you say the CIO looking down. That's what they always look down at the rest of us, don't they? I'm just kidding.
I wasn't going to say that out loud.
I worked with a lot of CIOs, and most of them actually are very humble, nice guys. So, So I think when we talk about from the CIO, from the C level, and looking across the organization, when I think about that, and sort of driving down, for the most part, and going back to the humbleness of most of the CIOs I know, they know a lot about the organization, what they're doing. They don't know as much about what each person is doing on an individual or departmental basis. And they get that because they've spent their whole career working in a certain part of the silo that usually is not the central piece of the operation of the business. And so what I've seen a lot of CIOs that are successful, that are really trying to drive using AI to make a difference, is they're trying to empower the organization versus handing things down to them. And I think it's a very important step that many of them take. And that's as far as success, where I've seen most of the success driven from.
Right. When we talk about AI automation, and we're looking at it from both of these lenses, right? From the top down, from the bottom up.
Sure.
So having both perspectives, this dual lens approach, why is that so important?
Sure. I think because everybody brings something different to the table. So if we talk about the CIO or individuals, directors within the IT department, depending on the size of the organization, who's sort of getting their hands into it, they are coming into it with a lot of experience and knowledge. They've seen when it comes to process change and change management, what works and what doesn't work, and they can bring those experiences into the fold when developing projects. And we could talk about it in a minute. I'll talk about for hours if you let me. But how AI is changing the fundamentals of how those interact. They bring that piece into it, and while they may not be bringing in the deep knowledge of how AI is changing, because none of us can. It changes every 20 minutes, it seems like. They still have the overarching understanding from an IT perspective, information perspective, how that operates. So it's important to have that piece in there. The other side is the individuals. And this is really where I think AI is changing things, in that we are now starting to empower the folks that have the problem to fix their own problem. And so it's important to have that piece too, because they are bringing the knowledge of what the issue is. They're bringing the knowledge of potentially what their solution could do to further the organization. And they've got that deep understanding. And if I don't want to riff too far on this, but historically what we've done, at least every IT project I've been a part of, there's big time exposure giving all the leadway to the users because they may not fully understand exactly what they want, and it costs a lot of money to build the wrong thing. With AI automations, with vibe coding, and a lot of the technology that's coming out, we're mitigating that risk because we can iterate so quickly and easily that now we can empower them to say, I don't know what I want. I'll try to figure it out. And they can iterate through that and figure out that process. So there's a fundamental shift from IT having to get everything lined up first before we build, then go live, to now just sort of fostering a partnership with those individuals.
Is there like an ideal starting point when implementing something like this? Like, do you I'm not even sure where that starting point would be, if it would be from the top or the bottom, or if it's this conjoined plan.
Yeah. I mean, it would be great if it was everybody. Everybody's coming into it to say, but it can be, it depends on the organization as far as who's sort of got a fire in their belly for the different pieces. And I've seen groups I've worked with where the C-level is the one driving it, and then they're bringing the people together, and they're sort of the executive sponsors to get all the ducks in the room to talk about the things. I've seen individuals that just have a passion for these things. They've watched YouTube videos or whatever it was and learned about AI automations or vibe coding, and the light went off in their head, and they're like, I can actually build something that's going to make a difference for us and do it myself. And so it depends. The reason I say both is I still, going back to what we talked about originally, I think both need to be there to be successful because they both groups bring something different to the table. I've been the rogue guy before that goes out and buys software, not telling the CIO that I bought it and using it. And it's not as successful as if we work together as a team, but that's often fostered from a concern that there's a gatekeeper and you're not going to get the tools you want. In this case, if we can all work together, it gets us there a lot closer.
I was going to ask about that because when implementing in this fashion, you also have to ensure visibility. You have to ensure the support. There needs to be transparency in the team.
Mm-hmm.
How do you ensure all of that's going to happen
Mm-hmm.
for something that's worker initiated when it comes to these automations? And how do you avoid shadow tech from creeping its way in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd say first, we're not avoiding it. We're trying to mitigate it because it's already there. So I was on a call the other day with, it was a CEO and the marketing director and the CEO's admin assistant. And we were going to do something near the end of the call. I think it was scheduling an appointment. She pulled up the calendar to schedule the next call. And in her Chrome browser, in the tabs at the top, I saw ChatGPT. And after she got off the call, I said to him, I said, so, you've talked before, you said you aren't really using AI, but I see that your assistant has ChatGPT up there. And he goes, I had no idea. I don't know what she's using it for. And I'm like, that's probably one of the things we should start with. But it's true. Every organization, people are already using the tech. So it's not, how do we, starting to develop a corporate wide initiative isn't, the reason not to start it isn't, we don't want to open up Pandora's box. The box is open. We're actually going to start reining it back in by starting an initiative and making it corporate wide and thinking through it. So that's sort of the first piece that I find with that. It's already there. If we can help people understand how to use it responsibly, and I'm using ChatGPT to send an email to spruce up my grammar. Great. I'm using ChatGPT to take all of our proprietary information and data, doing some analysis. We've got a problem. So we got to think about that. But I think by fostering that relationship, that's actually the first piece that mitigates the risk, is when we acknowledge that it's there and we work together and come up with rules that works for everybody, then that's how we really mitigate that issue.
I think it's really interesting that you say that everybody has a little bit of shadow tech somewhere in their organization.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever encountered somebody who doesn't have at least one tool that they haven't told anybody else about that they're
Yes.
using as a part of their workflow that nobody else has.
Yes. And then even more overtly, I ran into something the other day. They're using Salesforce, and they said, "Hey, we've got
Oh,
this connected app, so it's an API, and the certificate's expiring on it. We can't figure out what it is." And we figured out what it was. It was somebody inside the organization not doing anything really nefarious on the front end of it, but they had created an API connection out to Claude to analyze data because they got tired of downloading it in a spreadsheet and pasting it over there. It's like, okay, well.
I don't. I don't think any time it's ever for nefarious reasons. It's somebody, usually a knowledge worker, but it's usually somebody who has a task, sees an opportunity to make that task more efficient,
Yep.
and maybe communication isn't really strong in the company, or maybe they're just afraid they're going to get shut down, so they just,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of this stuff is so inexpensive, and ChatGTP is
Yeah.
$20 a month.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be willing to spend $20 a month if
Mm-hmm.
it meant my days were a little shorter, or I didn't have to spend so much time on these manual tasks.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And a lot of this can be free if we loop IT in and they can host a lot of this stuff server side. And now we've got it encased in a capsule. So no risk and it's free and we can play with it. And so that's going back to your initial question, which is how do you get started? I think that's a great way to get started. Get both teams together, have IT empower people with a playground, put that playground inside of something that can't be broken or can't leak information out, and just let them go. Let people play with it because they can't break anything. All they can really do is find new ways to do things. At the very worst, they find out what doesn't work, and they can go from there.
Now, one of the bigger challenges for like CIOs is when they implement tech, it has to be scalable.
Mm-hmm.
They may start with small tests, but then at some point it has to grow and it has to grow. So what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen that CIOs face when it comes to trying to scale an automation process, especially across
Sure.
larger organizations like an enterprise?
First of all, depending on the situation, I have to challenge the paradigm because we do think of things as building out these big scalable products that go across the organization. And the reason we do that is because it costs money, right? We have to build this and it has to work for everybody because we're putting a lot of money into it. And so we're spreading the cost across everybody and it gets there. With a lot of these tools, we can create micro apps that all they have to do is work for the 3 people in whatever department or in this subset of this department that need it, at least today. And they can iterate on that and build things. At some point, it gets to a level, if it works really well and it's transferable to other departments and other people, then we have to start thinking about scaling. But it is, like you said, it's so cheap now. And the amount of, not just in dollars, the resources, the amount of time it takes me to build an app can be in the 30-minute range. And so it it is such a low investment. I can do it a lot of times. And if I end up with 8 different groups building the same thing at the same time, it really hasn't cost me anything at this point. I just let them bubble up and build those things out. And then once we get to the point where I've got 8 different groups doing 8 different things, now let's get together and say, what's working for you? What's working there? Let IT come in, put it all together and develop something that can work organization wide. But what I find most people, the reason they don't build something is one, they're worried about getting shut down by the organization. And two, they're worried if they raise their hand, we're going to create a committee and a center of excellence, and we're going to come up with all of these rules. And the CIO is going to walk in and say, I know what you're looking for, but we need to make it work for everybody. And they don't want it to work for everybody. They want it to work for themselves. So I say, let it start there. Everybody build for themselves and then work it together and make it work for everybody.
I definitely know there are some knowledge workers who they don't want to be the center of attention. They don't want
Sure.
to, and they certainly don't want to be the one responsible for having suggested something, have it go to a certain point, and then maybe it fails.
Sure.
Or maybe it's successful and they want them to now spearhead this
Yeah, even worse, right?
new implementation process. And like, no, I didn't want to do that. I just want to use the tool.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I didn't want to be the CRM admin. I just knew there was a better way to use the CRM.
when it comes to knowledge workers, starting this process, have you seen cases personally where automation starting at the worker level has scaled up and been really successful?
Yeah. And so a couple different ways. One is, and we don't always see it as automation, but joking about the ChatGPT thing. So I've seen people using the LLMs through a chat model to do their daily tasks, and they don't really know they're doing automation. But when they start using the same prompt over and over again, and they even get to the point that they put their prompts in a Google Doc somewhere and paste them in, it's automation. Not very efficient, but it's automation that they've created. They've made a consistent process that they're doing over and over again, even though they haven't built it into an automation or workflow yet. And what I've seen people be really successful at that is things even as simple as writing emails. So where I was seeing easy success, I guess I could say, a quick success is customer service, where at first they're thinking AI, I got to build the chatbots and everything, and that's going to be a process and getting the knowledge base and all. What I've seen folks do though instead is using workflows or even just a GPT and ChatGPT to answer the same question over and over again. And that's a really good base to create success, is get together as the customer services department. And sometimes they start as their own individuals, but if they get together and get that FAQ together, build a GPT that has all the answers to all the FAQ, and then they can use that within their Gmail or their Outlook that answers the questions. I've seen those be really successful and be a good roadmap for building out a more robust, workflow or chatbot in the future that works there. Marketing is the other one. I've seen a bunch of people, some we've done classes on it, but doing social media content, there's a lot of tools you can purchase out there. But with vibe coding, we're building apps on the front end with workflows in the middle and the back end that have agents on them to write social media content. And so they can hook it up to Slack. And there's a couple of groups that have hooked it up to Slack and made it so they, as a team, are going in there saying, write me a tweet or write me a LinkedIn article or whatever it is about this topic. And then it brings it back. The whole group sees it. They can edit, iterate on it and that type of thing. And it's a good and fun way to get started. But it's really no different than putting it into the chat. It's just making it more codified for the whole group to use. But I've seen that's been an easy win for folks.
In your novel, Catch the Vibe, you talk about vibe coding.
Yeah.
And I gotta help me better understand, what exactly is vibe coding?
Vibe coding.
And what does that even mean when we talk about the context of AI?
Sure. It's a fairly new term, not that AI and mainstream is very old, but like really the last few months has caught on. It's probably like any saying or slogan, it means something specific and it's grown into meaning something general. So I think people are using the term vibe coding as using AI coding tools, low code, no code tools to build apps. The actual term vibe coding, where it comes from, is iterating with natural language to create an app. So take me, I like to build software. I do all the regular product management stuff of gathering the information, finding the requirements, defining my target audience, building a PRD, a product requirement definition, and then going from there. Vibe coding is, hey, I'd like to build a chatbot that does this. And then it spits it out, and you come back and say, no, you only got like 10% of that right. To do this and do that. And that's the vibe piece of it, is being able to just sort of have a natural language conversation back and forth with the agent, whether it's Replit, Bolt, there's a whole bunch of them out there, Microsoft Copilot, so on and so forth, to just sort of have that iterative conversation. It's just sort of like you're vibing while you code.
I like that. All right, I'm gonna switch gears on you really quick. I'm gonna come back to something else that you had mentioned earlier about having these control groups, having these groups of individuals work on developing something in a more controlled environment.
Sure.
how can companies actually support that? How can a company create a system that supports experimentation without losing control, without losing focus, without, losing data?
Yeah, good point. I think it all starts with an open conversation. Like I said, the as you called it, the shadow tech. The shadow tech
Yes.
is it's only possible to have the shadow tech if you're not shining a light on it. And so if you're building I call it a playground. If you're building a playground where people can play safely and they know they're okay with doing whatever they want to do in there, then that frees things up, because there's no reason for somebody to hide that what they're doing. They can have it all right out there in the open. And then once they realize somebody else is doing the same thing, people, safety in numbers. Now I'm working with somebody else, and we can really, now there's two people that care about what I care about. And I'm more, we can talk about our passion and get it out there. So I think just being open about it and giving everybody a safe place to be and play, it takes down a lot of those walls. It just makes it a lot safer that people don't have to go around. And then I think the other thing, and this has nothing to do with AI, nothing to do with coding, nothing to do with any of it, is at the C level, at the leadership level, as an organization. I've done management consulting, so I'm going to apologize for this. You all have to be singing off the same sheet of music. So, like, just for any successful organization, to be successful, everybody in the organization knows what the mission is, what the vision is, and what matters to us today. Because if you're not all, lined up that way, you can't get anywhere. And I think that same thing is true in this case. If everybody cares about the same thing, then as a frontline functional person, I don't see IT as the enemy trying to control me. Because if I have an idea that's going to make the company better as far as going towards that vision we have, and IT is on the same plate, then we're all good to go. It's when everybody's looking out for their own interests. I think that's where we start to lose that, and it's not as safe of a place to work. And now we do start to hide the things we're doing, because I'm worried IT just cares about getting their promotion, not the thing I'm doing to solve a business problem. And that's just a universal, anytime we do a new change management issue.
Now, I hate to say it like this, but it's true. Not every idea is a good idea.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to have a butting of heads, right? Where somebody as a knowledge worker has this fantastic idea that they think is going to, build efficiency. We're going to automate this and it'll just make life easier. But somebody else, like an IT director or a CIO, completely disagrees, and then they lock horns. What happens then? What happens when your goals are misaligned? You're thinking two different directions at the same time.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think these new tools with low code, no code AI tools to build apps help solve part of that problem. Because what we end up with when we have two different opinions and we're butting heads is because I think one thing and you think something else. And in lieu of actual proof either way, it's an argument. And Replit, which does AI coding apps, they build a product that lets you code without knowing how to code. Their main product manager, Manny Bernardi, he has a saying, and I use it all the time, and it is, demos win arguments. And so in this case, it's not about, do I have a good idea? It's, I built an app. Is it good or bad? And if you can build that app very quickly, two things happen. One of two things happen. You prove that this is a really good idea, or you actually prove to yourself it was a bad idea. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and not talk about it anymore. But it makes it hard to argue with if, as a functional person in the organization, I have this idea and I build it and it works. It's hard to argue against that. So, and then also on the other side from IT, if they want to build something and it works, but differently, now we're having a conversation. We're not butting heads. Now we're just trying to figure out the minute details of how to work it out.
All the logistics behind it. Right.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But we
may have, we may have these differing of opinions, but if I'm able to turn around and show you the data and prove it, then that changes the conversation entirely.
Yeah.
And that can only happen if I'm given the environment where I'm allowed to experiment and I'm allowed to try
Yeah.
something a little bit different.
Yep. Yeah. And now because the barrier to entry and the cost of resources is so low, it makes it easier to give me that playground to play in, because before it was like you're losing focus on what we need to do to make money in the organization. Now it's like if you can carve out an hour and a half of your day to try it out, yeah, sure, that's fine.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
again, Chat GTP is $20 a month. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's a quick and easy grab just to see if I can build out some kind of
Yep.
automation. I mean, even Foxit software is only like $130 for the entire year.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it becomes really easy to just grab new software and try it
Yep.
and see
Yep.
if this does exactly what I hope it does.
Yep. Exactly.
Judson Voss, you are a business strategist and author of multiple books, including The AI Myth Reimagined, Everything in Business is Changing, and Catch the Vibe, How to Build Apps That Matter. Both of those links are going to be in the description, along with links to your website and your social media. Thank you again so much for joining me on this episode. I really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me on.